Author J.K. Rowling is unfortunately in the news again, once again for blatant transphobia. Yeah. So now Rowling took to social media after highlighting a video by one Dr. David Bell. Dr. David Bell, of course, attempted to link being transgender with autism and pushed for the erasure, complete erasure of transgender people. I've got some quotes on that later on in the story, but first, let's get to some of the responses. Now, along with the video, first, she tweeted, "History will judge whether Dr. David Bell was a hateful transphobe or trying to alert people to a medical scandal." Scandal! But he's far from the only health professional raising these concerns, and I have the letters and emails to prove it. Ah, yes, you've got the letters and emails. Well, I mean, sure, I guess we could see them. That would be nice. Now, that said, a lot of backlash. A lot of backlash. Especially from members of the LGBTQIA+ community, including friend of the show, Mike Figueredo, of the Humanist Report, who put out this response that was highlighted by Rowling herself. So this is important. So you can see part of his message there in her tweet, or her quote tweet, which, by the way, really signifies that she does read these things. And she seems to be very, very triggered by this, which is fun. Me shares video of experienced psychiatrist who turned whistleblower. Not really, because he didn't even actually work with transgender children or people with GID. Expressing his deep concern at high numbers of autistic children and children with internalized homophobia presenting at gender clinics. To which Mike responds, "You're a repulsive bigot. Go fuck yourself, transphobic trash." To which I say, yes, agreed. Nice one, Mike. That's awesome. He followed it up by saying this: "Attack a marginalized community, expect good people to defend them. Trans people just want to live and be happy, and your priority is to make their existence hell. Fuck you. If your feelings are hurt, dry your tears with a pile of money, you rich pig." Ooh, I love it. All right, good stuff. You also had fellow YouTuber Vosh, who got into a row with Rowling a couple of weeks ago, adding this, quote, "You should share the opinions of more experts then, since psychiatric and medical institutions in America and the UK overwhelmingly support trans people. You are such a piss baby. Imagine being a trillionaire author and crying over a go fuck yourself on Twitter." It's so good. That's so good. And then, of course, you have a trans streamer by the name of Keffels, who also weighed in on this one. Let me bring that up. I've always wanted to ratio J.K. Rowling with a picture of my favorite female athlete. And that's Leah Thomas, who is a transgender swimmer. She recently competed in the Olympics. And, of course, conservatives have been very, very angry at the fact that she exists. Been making a lot of news about that. Now, by the way, that ratio, it happened. Okay. So Keffels got 37K likes on that. All right. So more so than J.K. Rowling. A lot of love online for Keffels. And, of course, a lot of backlash for J.K. Rowling, who has a ton more followers on Twitter, by the way. And so millions of people follow her. Millions of people do not follow Keffels or Vosh or Mike Figueredo. And yet, seems to be that her opinion is not exactly popular. You know, because it also is an attempt to erase transgender people from the world. And that's the issue here. So, look, I love to see it. Rowling is, of course, engaged in blatant transphobia. She has been engaged. In fact, right now, that is eclipsing her work. And so that's a problem. If you want to trash your own legacy, I mean, go ahead. Just don't be surprised if people will call you out for the things that you say. That is consequence culture, is what it is. Because cancel culture doesn't exist for people like J.K. Rowling. It doesn't exist for people like Louis C.K. These people are still in the news. Now, if you want to talk about the small person in the office you know, regular Joe who gets canceled, then okay, that's a discussion, because those people can lose their job, they can get ostracized from their community and things like that. And that can have really permanent damaging consequences on them, which is why you do have to be careful not to say stupid, hateful things. But as far as rich people are concerned, they don't get canceled. That's not a thing. When you're wealthy, you're immune from cancellation. Unless you're, of course, Kevin Spacey. But, I mean, Kevin Spacey, obviously. That said, look, J.K. Rowling also thinks that she's a defender of women, which is funny because, again, she's punching down at women and then pretending to be a victim. And again, trans women are women, and she is not defending trans women. She is attacking trans women. Now, look, here's the thing. Are they born the opposite sex? Yes. Is gender and sex the same thing? No. No. There are differences in the gender you identify with versus what genitals you were assigned at birth. And so as a cis male, I've never had any issue with my gender identity or my genital assignment. And for people like me, it can be difficult to understand the idea of being at war with your own body for it basically being born the wrong sex. I get it. It is difficult to understand, though. But what bothers me is the complete and utter lack of empathy or even autonomy for those who have to deal with this situation. And so if you're trying to dictate who they are, what they identify with, you know, what gender they identify with, and how they live their lives, and you're also trying to dictate where they pee. And so, look, if you identify as a female, you dress as a female, you talk as a female, but you are forced to use a male restroom, what do you think is going to happen if you're in these situations? You're going to have taunting, you're going to have teasing, you're going to have bullying, you're going to have violence. Whereas you let them use the bathroom with their own identity, none of that happens. And so, look, it's been proven in the numbers that trans women specifically get attacked in these situations. And so, look, what I think Rowling is doing, and I know it's going to be a super hot take, I think she's projecting a little bit of misandry as a result of the abuse that she suffered towards people that she views as men. Now, look, she got abused herself. That sucks. Nobody deserves abuse. But she's projecting that onto trans women as if they're the ones who abused her. They didn't. They didn't do anything. But again, she does not see them as women, passing or not. She sees them as the face of her abusers, and then, of course, uses her gigantic platform in order to abuse them. And it also takes me back to Dr. Bell, right? Dr. Bell argues that transgenderism is completely made up by the militant trans lobby, a product of hatred, of mental illness, and a misogyny, and then compares gender transition to conversion therapy, which again is not the same thing. No, what this guy is advocating for is conversion therapy. You're telling trans women, and by extension, trans men, like Elliot Page, for example, that you do not exist and you should not exist, and you should be erased from existence. Here's some quotes from Dr. Bell, quoted by J.K. Rowling, right? It should be the objective in any advanced civilization presented with this problem, again, they're talking about transgender youth, to target 100% desistance and as early as possible. It is necessary that persisters, desisters, and detransitioners command the best health care that we can provide. Medical research should dedicate itself to finding the best solutions to the irreversible harm that's been done to the victims of gender ideology. Here's the thing. People who transition are overwhelmingly pleased with the results of said transition. And actually, there are many who say that they wish they could have transitioned sooner and avoided going through male puberty, which is done, again, and they're able to do that because there are medications called puberty blockers that allow people to basically wait until they're an adult to make a final decision on whether or not to continue with the transition or and get the surgeries. Because you cannot get gender-affirming surgeries until you're 18, until you're a legal adult. That's how it works. So what this guy is doing, Dr. Bell, is pushing an anti-trans ideology, and so of course J.K. Rowling agrees with him. And that's what's dangerous, because the harm of pushing people into the proverbial closet, making transgender youth have to hide who they are and how they feel, that's going to do massive harm to people. Massive harm to them. Look, talking about conversion therapy, we know conversion therapy doesn't work on gay people. It doesn't work on transgender people. It won't work on transgender people. If you are endorsing it, you're endorsing the erasure and death of members of the trans community, period. And if you think, if that is your position, and you think they should all die, i.e. not exist, then just say it. Because there's no difference here. Transphobes and bigots do not want trans people to exist. Just be honest about it. Just be honest about it, about how horrible of a person you are, instead of claiming that you're the good person and that you're the victim. Oh, I'm the victim, and I'm just trying to help women, and I'm just trying to help children. Not true at all. One last thing. Predictably, there were homophobic attacks that came out against Mike, transphobic attacks against Keffels, among the many different things by some of the J.K. Rowling stans were people that were accusing Mike of being a pedophile, of course. They called him an incel, a misogynist for disagreeing with J.K. Rowling. Also going after Vosh, who is, of course, no stranger to controversy. She labeled him misogynistic, an incel, a pedophile, etc. And so that's those are some pretty common smears. And then, of course, this whole thing trying to conflate and trying to link transgender, being transgender with autism, well, that's deeply ableist as well. And so she comes after autistic people, and Dr. Bell comes after autistic people and treats them as if they're not people. No, they're unwell, and they're being influenced because they have no agency over themselves to become transgender. So you're infantilizing neurodivergent people, what she's doing, and then using autism to defend her transphobia. It's ridiculous. So way to attack two different groups that are heavily stigmatized. What a great role model you are, Joanne. Well done. Well done. Now, of course, I'm sure that I'll be attacked by this, by unhinged, by talking about this by unhinged people who also want to erase trans people from existence, despite trans people 100% not affecting their lives in any meaningful way, much less negative way. But I suppose it comes with the territory of being on the right side of history and standing up for marginalized people.